memorable meal was in Milano, about 100 yards away from the Duomo, and it was called Bocca di Vino. And so the vintner was, or the owner was a wine connoisseur. He would go out into the Dolomites, figure out which wines he liked, and then he would make a 7-course meal around that.
Wow.
And I got a chance to eat there twice, and it's spectacular. So what was your most memorable meal in your travels?
Oh my.
That's a good question.
It was in Spain, and now I'm going to have a problem because I'm trying to remember the name of the
That's okay.
restaurant.
Do you remember the
This
city?
is one of the, well, it was in Barcelona, but it was outside of town. It wasn't the, what was the one that was up 90 kilometers north that shut down?
It was the best restaurant on the wall.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Do you remember the name? Jose Andres was trained there.
Oh, wow.
So I never got to eat there, but Al Gore got to eat there twice, and it pissed me off.
Wow.
And I think he ate for free. I think.
Well, I didn't ask him about that.
Well, he did create the internet, so we'll give it to him, right?
In any case, this was we went there for lunch, guests of some of our friends, and 5 hours later, we had gone through, I lost track of how many courses. So it was just an amazing meal. But there is another one, which if you're in this area, you could go to. It's one of the Jose Andres mini bars. There are 33 to 35 courses. Each of them is about one mouthful. Liquid nitrogen is involved in some of them.
Wow.
There are 6 people and 3 chefs. And so you really get to watch them assembling the most amazing dishes right before your eyes. And so that's probably the next most interesting I've ever had. But we've had many, many wonderful meals. A lot of them here in this restaurant.
Yeah.
I'll
You say
endorse
so.
mini bar, by the way. It wasn't fabulous.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I'll endorse mini bar as well.
Okay. It's
I have some
Gotta write
photos
that
if
down.
anyone wants to see.
Yeah, I do.
It's fun-
Now,
fun liquid nitrogen.
for those of you who are in New York, however, consider 11 Madison.
Oh, yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It is, and it used to be, a 3-star French restaurant, and then COVID hit, and the chef decided to go into vegan.
Oh.
So it's a vegan restaurant,
Oh, I should try.
but they have the wine list from the predecessor French restaurant. And so it is unbelievable. I've only had one meal there, and I would go back in a heartbeat.
Invite
Really
us
good.
all.
Sorry? It's
I said invite us all.
Oh, it's only $500 a head, not counting the wine.
Well, next question.
Yeah.
Gold?
Must be some good pictures.
Who's got another question?
I have a question about accessibility.
Okay.
I was talking to Elliot, and he said that he wants to make everything in the Blind Institute accessible to everyone.
Yes.
To hearing, to deaf,
Yes, that's right.
to
Should be.
blind and everything. How much is that gonna cost me to do that to my website? And who do I go to ask about it?
Well, there are places to go that will give you advice about what it should do. The WCAG stuff from the 3.0, what am I saying? World Wide Web Consortium has a standard. Here's the problem. Disabilities are a spectrum. And there isn't just one thing that you do for somebody who's blind. Because you might have just poor quality vision and you need magnification is enough. Or maybe you need contrast change. Or maybe you're colorblind and you need imagery which is distinguishable in black and white and not in color. I mean, there are a whole bunch of things. So here's the thing I worry about. I'm not sure I can answer your question about cost. Because you could spend a lot trying to make things accessible. What is missing, in my opinion, is intuition for the user interface designers. The user experience designers don't have an intuition about what will work and what doesn't work.
Right.
sticking wax in your ear or putting a blindfold on your face does not tell you anything about how to make things accessible. For example, for someone who's blind, the standard mechanisms are screen readers of various kinds. JAWS is an example. But putting a blindfold on and trying to use your website doesn't help much unless you're really experienced with using JAWS. One of the most important experiences I've ever had was having a video conversation with Jack Chen, from a former Google blind attorney. And so we were talking about something, and we had to go look something up. And so of course I went to Google, and so did he, but he was going through the screen reader. Now, he's listening to the screen reader at roughly 2 to 2.5 times faster than normal speech. So I'm hearing this, and of course he knows what's coming, and so he cuts it off. So I'm hearing, and he's stepping his way through. I just stopped because I was mesmerized by what he was doing. And of course he won the game because he got to the answer before I did. The thing is that unless you've experienced that, you don't have a clue how to design things for someone who is that skilled in using those tools. So the first thing I've been advocating for is that people who are doing work in accessibility of computer-based systems should be cataloging examples of what works and what doesn't work and why. And I'll give you one tiny little example of this. Suppose you're colorblind, and you encounter a web page that's got a bunch of charts on it that are different colors and you can't tell. Well, the designer needs to understand that there might be other ways than color to help you distinguish, one bar chart from another. It might be texture. It might be, black. So look at your website in black and white and ask, does it make any sense? So that's a tiny example, but it's the sort of thing that we need to do. At Google, we have training programs to try to teach our user interface and user experience designers more about accessibility, but it's still not adequate. So I would love it to have folks from your organization telling us what examples we should show designers so they get the intuition that they need. Now, we talked about this earlier, and that's the oral interaction, not for people who are deaf necessarily, although you can have an oral interaction except it's captioned. But the idea of having an exchange with an AI agent, a discussion about what you're trying to do, as opposed to trying to work your way through some website, could turn out to be a game changer.
Matt?
So
Well, you're actually getting on my follow-up question, which is going to be
okay.
my voice, but I want to make a quick comment.
Yeah.
You have a glass of wine, just to give another personal example on user interface. When my brother, I was at the Wall Street Journal, and my brother was dying of cancer. He was a long-time Wall Street Journal reader. And of course, in our business, which is, let's face it, not the most technically adept business, we had added the button that tells you that you can hear the story.
Mm-hmm.
And his eyesight was impaired. But he kept saying, but the button is not for someone visually impaired to know how to pull it out.
Exactly.
But you kind of were anticipating my question, which was, we talked about AI and what that means if we think about chatbots or knowledge. But to what extent, as you look ahead, partly because of AI, do you think we're heading toward a more voice-oriented world, period, and that how we interface with the web, with the technology, will change somewhat substantially in the next decade or so, because particularly of voice or maybe another way of connecting?
No, I think conversation, not necessarily voice, however. I can imagine easily, text-based, which is easier actually on the system. Text-based interactions are easier than voice interactions because there's less opportunity to misunderstand. So I think conversation is what is the likely interface that we're likely to experience. It's not too different than calling someone on the phone.
But still textually, you think?
Well, deaf people use text. We used to use teletypes. Except Sigrid hated the service because they insisted on getting all the spelling exactly right. And if they got it wrong, they had to retype it. Sigrid said, "I know what you said." So she's literally talking to a person who is running the teletype and typing back to her so she can see what the other third party was saying. And they wasted so damn much time retyping everything and finally threw the teletype out the window. So, so much for that.
Sudar Shen and I were talking a little bit about this earlier. And my feeling is that
The
keyboards,
storm was coming
We
outside.
just saw it.
keyboard. I believe keyboards will become the new next fax machine, right? Because we'll just talk to the computer. We won't.
So you
I
think we
think,
will?
I think it varies. I mean, and that's sort of the whole point. Some people prefer to type.
Yeah.
Some people prefer to talk. Some prefer to point at things.
But talking, I assume the technology and the accessibility
Gets
of talking
better.
will make it much
For
easier
people
and
who
more.
can talk and aren't deaf.
We'll get more acclimated to that as an option. I think you won't be.
Well, I want to say
You won't be fighting with Siri in the same way that you do now.
no, hopefully not, or with Google's assistant or what have you. But remember, conversation. Think conversation. Don't think voice only. Think conversation. And I think that's the most important likely outcome. I want to give you another observation to make, though, about this kind of discussion we're having. Have you been on a conference call where there are multiple parties, a Zoom call? You have multiple parties, and they're speaking one at a time. They've been raising their hands, but the chat room is running.
Yes.
And the chat room is going like crazy because you can type anytime you want to. You don't interrupt anybody. And I have had experiences where we started out with a conversation, and then we all shut up and typed at each other because you could type anytime you wanted to, and you didn't have to wait for your turn. And so it was a very surprising shift in style because of the concurrency that particular mechanism had. And by the way, you also had a typed record of whatever the hell it said. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I'm waiting for ZioTag to basically also report who interrupted whom, who talked for 20
Yes.
minutes, who talked for 3 minutes,
Oh, yeah, that would
who
be
never
good.
said anything at all.
Yes.
And then you can do it by rank or
Yes.
gender
And you can pick up, discrimination or, who.
Who's the rudest?
Yeah, who's being listened to and who's
Well, it was
not.
interesting because some of my colleagues in high school, they assign a student that task during classroom discussions to see who's talking, how much, and who's not talking, and so on and so forth. Because it's a way to encourage class participation. Because hey, you didn't talk yesterday. It's time to kick.
Yeah.
I just had a general question for you. In the last 15, 20 years, what's the biggest surprise for you that you hadn't anticipated?
I think the biggest surprise, there were two. The first one was the reaction to the World Wide Web,
Okay.
especially the Mosaic browser that came out in '93. And all of us who were on the net at that time, most of us being academics, researchers, the Defense Department, by that time, NSF, NASA, DOE, but the general public was just beginning to get access to the internet. The first commercial services came in 1989, with 3 of them, UUNet, PSINet, and SurfNet out in California. So the biggest surprise for me there was the incredible amount of content that people put on the net, simply because they thought other people might find it useful. The idea that your knowledge was useful to someone else was ultimately beguiling, and the energy that people put into this, without any compensation at all, really surprised me.
Okay.
This rapid inflation of the content of the World Wide
Interesting.
Web. And that's in the mid-1990s, and of course, when Netscape Communications went public, the boom hits. So that was the first big surprise. The second big surprise comes in 2007 with the iPhone.
Okay.
And that combination of technology was prophetic and magic and astonishing. I mean, Jobs, or whatever else you might think, the guy was astonishingly capable of understanding what combination of capabilities could be dramatic, make a dramatic difference. And there's no question that it has. I mean, look at what we're doing with all of them, including this
Yeah.
one. So that was a big surprise. The irony of all this is that the handheld mobile phone was actually invented in 1973 by Marty Cooper. Marty started working on that for Motorola at the same time that Bob Kahn and I started working on the internet. And we knew nothing about each other. Then in 1983, we turned the internet on, and Marty Cooper made his first phone call on a handheld mobile to the AT&T guys to say, ha, guess what I'm doing? So I actually, a friend of mine, Danny Cohn, you probably will remember, Danny bought one of the first mobile handhelds from Motorola. It was called the Motorola Brick. It weighed 2.5 pounds. It was this tall and it had a whip antenna. So Danny, a friend of mine at USC ISI, called me and said, come to lunch, I have something to show you. And so I came to lunch, and there's this thing sitting on the table. I'm like, what's that? He said, it's a phone. I said, where are the wires? And he says, there aren't any. I said, well, how does it work? And we get to talking, and I asked him a question that he didn't know the answer to. So he said, why don't you talk to the guy that invented it? So he gave me Marty's phone number, and I called Marty on the phone. The first question I asked Marty Cooper was, so how long does the battery last? And Marty says, about 20 minutes, but you can't hold it up longer than that.
That's a great story.
So those two, I mean, there are many other things that have happened, but those two are real milestones, in my view, of what is happening to us now. And of course, the arrival of social networking has been dramatic, but it was around in the earliest days of the ARPANET.
Wow.
Email was invented in 1971. Ray Tomlinson at BB&N figured out how to do network email. And we all went nuts because this was a very convenient way of communicating when you were not both awake. So it worked across multiple time zones. Very quickly after that idea got implemented, we started creating distribution lists. And the first distribution list that I joined was called Sci-Fi Lovers. And we had big arguments about what were the best novels and who were the best writers. And then the next one I joined was called Yum Yum, and that was a restaurant review managed by Stanford. I know I'm overstepping my time here.
That's great.
But these are anecdotes from literally ancient history that illustrated the possibilities of this social, the use of this technology for social purposes. So we were experiencing pieces of what we experience today, but I have to admit I would not have anticipated or predicted some of the consequences of providing 8 billion people, or whatever the number is, 5.6 billion people, with a giant bulletin board to put anything they want to.
Oh, wow, what a story.
Wonderful.
And it's interesting, neither of those initial DLs, distribution lists, were at technology. Like they were regular fun stuff and life stuff.
Yeah?
And YouTube was formed 20 years ago.
I'm sorry, see?
And YouTube
Oh.
took it over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we bought, that was a brilliant move by Google at the time. I think it was probably, Eric Schmidt was CEO at the time. He paid $1.5 billion for something that did not have a huge audience yet. And now here we are. It's probably more streaming video. We have 1 trillion videos on YouTube.
Can you believe that?
I mean,
Thank you very much.
can you imagine how much memory that requires?
I know.
Hopefully not all in memory.
That's a good one, yeah.
That's technique.
Okay,
Technique.
we
That's
pause
right.
Another,
for well, we'll go for another question.
order. Do another
You
question.
want
People can-
the sorbet, right?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. We'll when they come around, we'll do that. Everybody choose what you want. Okay, do the next question.
I have.
Great.
So the internet is definitely a big thing, and we see so many legend companies, but those companies are very centralized. Do you think, like in future, the human civilization will move to a more decentralized way about the internet?
So this is question number 103. I get that question a lot. So I have a practiced answer. First of all, when you say centralized, you really mean concentrated, because the companies, AWS, Google, Microsoft, have footprints all over the world. We have data centers all over the world. So we are a very physically decentralized operation. We rely very heavily, all of us do, on automation to operate these things. But there is a pendulum here. The reason you're seeing the concentration is very simple. It's called economy of scale. That's what's driving this. Building a whole bunch of little data centers has enormous overhead compared with building a smaller number of really honky big ones. And the AI revolution is reinforcing that, because the amount of computation that you need to do in order to do the training is very significant. In fact, it's so big that we're getting to the point where we need to harness multiple data centers in order to do the training. And the training requires a huge amount of data exchange, because you're doing a bunch of matrix multiplies in an extremely high dimensional space, so data has to flow back and forth. So we have to build super high-speed data transfer capabilities if we're going to harness more than one data center that are physically separate from each other to do this. So the data rates that we are focusing on right now, the baseline is 400 gigabits per second per optical channel. The next step is 800 gigabits per second per optical channel. And there's multiple optical channels per fiber, and there's multiple fibers in the bundle. So the numbers are mind-boggling. But we're going to see this kind of concentration. However, there's another movement that's happening. You hear the word edge computing. And of course, you know about these devices that we have. I used to think of these as the edge. Well, they're not anymore. There's something else further out, because there's stuff in between, and we're starting to see more computing between your user device and the data centers that are providing local low latency capabilities. So as an example, language translation might be done in an edge device as opposed to something off in the middle of the data center. Wow, we're getting some serious language.
Yeah.
So that's I think you will see this oscillation back and forth. If you look in the textbooks of the 1960s, and you look at the data centers of the day, they were big time-sharing systems, and they cost millions of dollars. And the predictions were that they would just get bigger and bigger, and you would see, smoke and steam coming out of the top of this giant building that had a big time-sharing machine in it. But then eventually we ended up with laptops and desktops and pads, and people said, "Oh, I could use those to build the data center." So then first it went distributed, then it came back to the data center, and then it was redistributed again. So this is going to go back and forth.
So I have my question. The economic question of sort of monopoly and public assets. The data centers are clearly private, though governments use them as well. But the real question is the value created out of the public asset of everything that's on the internet and on YouTube and so forth. Do we need something like mining rights or water rights or something where part of the value is actually a public asset rather than something that should be private and should be taxed and used to educate people?
Like that New York Times story about the Facebook center in Tennessee,
Yeah.
sucked up all the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a
I
different
mean, that's a
problem than the
different,
one
but
that
it's
she's going after.
related to it. I mean, the costs and also the value that's created.
So
Who
the
owns it?
interesting, there's a rather peculiar tension there. The first thing you observe is that people like the two of you and one are authors, and you would like the value of your work you'd like to realize the value of your work. Do you want to come and take orders now? We're just going to keep on going, and you just go around and take.
Sure.
So there is a tension about owning rights and being able to benefit from those rights for a period of time. It's important to remember that in the Constitution, the idea behind copyright was that you harvest the value for a finite period of time. And in the Constitution, it was 14 years. And if you were still alive at the end of the 14 years, for a fee, you could control access to the content for another 14. Attorneys for various and sundry companies, I won't name any in particular, have managed to extend that right to 75 years after the death of the author. And I personally think that's too long, because the other half of the deal was making that information public domain so that the community and the society could benefit from it. So we have lost that. So there's a tension here between the rights of authors and content creators and the public interest in that information. What Esther is talking about, though, is not an unreasonable view of the content of the open web. It looks like a public resource because a lot of it is freely available. And what the question that one could reasonably ask is whether the parties who create that content should have some direct benefit from it. And I want to be careful here because I'm still in executive approval and I'm being recorded, and so I don't want to.
You're being transcribed. I thought you were being transcribed and not recorded.
Yeah, I don't want to be on record as having asserted a company policy that I'm not responsible for articulating. But I do appreciate the idea that somehow the parties who create the content ought to have some more direct benefit from it. There is an argument, however, that it doesn't necessarily imply remuneration. The argument is that by sharing the information, they gain enormously from everyone else's contributions. And so that's one argument that says the current system is not a bad system. But I do understand the argument that if you've been able to monetize the information somehow, that you've concentrated the benefit in one organization.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? Do you think that we know how to adequately measure the economic value in both directions of the kinds of things that
It's a
we're
very
talking
good
about?
question, and I think I don't know the answer to that. And the part that makes it so tricky in the AI space is that we don't even fully understand, at least I don't, exactly what information was consumed to produce the results. And I would be...
I'm gonna burn my question. Like I got one question I gotta think about.
I would be sad if in the midst of trying to have this debate, we prevented ourselves from taking advantage of what has been created, because those systems, whatever their deficiencies are still pretty amazing in providing us with useful results. Your burning question?
I am because, I mean, one, it's hard to decide when to jump in. I'm gonna burn my question though, because you said a couple things on that. And I didn't mention it in my introduction, but I'm also legally trained in copyright and patents and intellectual property law. So all this is very interesting to me, but I'm gonna ask you a very pointed question. What do you think about shrink-wrapped licenses and the utility in the economic
They're
space?
terrible because the parties who are forced into abiding by those policies don't take time to read them, don't really have it. All they want to do is get something done.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of shrink-wrapped
Yeah, so the
licenses.
follow-up to that is, of course, like a lot of these licenses these days, you essentially, it's an unbalanced financial transaction and all that. Per your comment there, but you're essentially giving up your data rights, and data and personal and persona is essentially the commodity of the era, especially when you're talking about AI. And do you see a mechanism by which we can rebalance that fundamental relationship?
I think it's really hard. Let me give you an example of something that Brad Smith tried at Microsoft. He was arguing that somehow we ought to label the data as to its source, and he was concerned about country, because it was in the context of international sovereignty arguments.
Which is a hot topic.
We want national data sovereignty.
Yep.
And so can we confine things, can we mark things as to where we can find? And my first reaction was that as soon as you combined anything, you have a combinatorial, literally, a combinatorial explosion. And you'd never be able to track what information belongs to whom. And by the time it's been mushed through an AI training system, it's very, very hard to understand what piece of information contributed what to the output. So for
You can
that
always
particular-
add salt to the soup, but you can't get the soup out.
Yeah, it's like it's like, you know, cracking an egg or pouring cream in the coffee.
Or should he be remunerated based on
Yeah.
the amount of the
Well,
contribution?
let me give you another related example. In the telecoms world, pre-internet, it was very common to charge people for time and distance. And so you had to track that information. When I worked at MCI many years ago, even in the 1990s, we would collect 90 terabytes of billing information per month. And we would calculate our bills. That's how we became a $30 billion a year company, 70 cents at a time. Now, imagine trying to do the billing for some very complex function of information melded together into a multi-layer neural model. I mean, the internet design was flat pricing. And where did he get that from? He got it from the ARPANET, the predecessor network. Well, how did that happen? Well, the guys that built the ARPANET or funded it at DARPA said, we're not in the business of trying to make a profit or anything. We just want to make sure that everything gets paid for. So they said, well, how much do all the contracts cost to build and run this thing? And they said, how many people have, devices on it? And they just divided it and said, that's how much you pay. And it was mostly per packet switch. And there were like 70, 80, 100 packet switches. So it was not unusual for $100,000 a year or something. Flat rate. Didn't matter how much or how little you used. Well, guess what? A lot of the internet has adopted exactly that. And why did that turn out to be a good thing? Because people were willing to try things out without fear of getting a giant bill. And that opened up creativity and innovation and willingness to try new things. So that's why I think the flat rate idea was important. So now if we come back to this question of I want to get paid for the information I put into this, I get very nervous about attempting to do that. How much sand will that put in the gears? There might be other business models besides a direct compensation, but I don't quite know what it is. And that's why I'm an engineer, not a business guy.
And that's why I think it should be, at least some of it, a public asset.
Well, I think the idea of a public good is a notion that we should harness and try to understand whether are there any analogs, or is this so different that we have to sit back and start rethinking it?
So just as a follow-up to this, do you think the internet would become more decentralized or isolated, where information just gets ported in the future? Because there's no way to kind of
we're starting to see fragmentation at many layers in the architecture. The notion of data sovereignty is potentially hazardous or corrosive, because the value of the internet is the connectivity. When we designed it, and it has its side effects. When Bob and I did the design, our first assumption was that we didn't know what was going to talk to what. All we knew was we had to make sure that if something had to talk to something else, that it could. And so we designed it so anything could talk to anything else. And then we said, you can hang up if you want to. You could refuse to talk. But we wanted to make sure that anything could at least make the initial attempt to connect. Now, some people will say, well, that's a bad idea because now we have denial of service attacks and all kinds of other things because everybody can talk to everybody. And we built in, many of us, mechanisms for dealing with those problems. But had we not done that, if you had to know the party that you needed to talk to before you could talk, how the hell would you do business with an unknown clientele? How does somebody show up on your doorstep saying, you've never seen me before, but I'm interested in your product or your service? So I think keeping it open is important. The problem we're getting into is that this notion of digital sovereignty is drawn from the 1648,
Is it the Treaty of Westphalia?
the Treaty of Westphalia, thank you. That's what I was looking for. You're almost as good as Google.
Almost.
So the
that nerdy aspect?
It was actually called the Peace of Westphalia.
Okay.
Because there were many treaties, 100 Years' War and many, many, many other disputes were settled by that. But it was settled in part by creating the notion of national sovereignty. And so some countries right now are trying to fit data sovereignty into that picture. The trouble is that interferes with connectivity. It can create a fractionated environment, in which case a lot of the stuff that we rely on today won't work anymore. And so I have been trying hard, very hard to say to countries who are pushing for data sovereignty and isolation of data, to say, look, it's not where the data is that counts, it's whether or not you have access control to it. Cryptography is your friend here. Don't give the keys to people that you don't want to have access to the data. Now, key management is not a trivial exercise, and I'm not trying to say that that's trivial or simple. But that's a better answer than isolating pieces of internet from each other. Because you'll lose the network effect, which Metcalf articulated. I don't agree with his exact number. He said it was the value of the network grows as the square of the number of things connected to it.
Excuse me, I have a decaf coffee.
American coffee?
Decaf coffee.
Decaf
Decaf,
coffee.
no.
Right here.
Okay.
I would like a, oh, we haven't gone around to ordering dessert yet.
I think
Okay.
Sigrid ordered
Oh,
dessert.
Sigrid ordered, could I get a cappuccino,
Yeah, sure.
caffeinated?
Same. And
2, 3, 3
Say,
coffee. 4.
4? Any more? No?
Do I hear a 5?
Going.
And I have one regular. I'm so sorry.
Is that
You have
American?
black coffee?
Yeah, right here.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
anyway, I think that the fragmentation is a serious problem, and that we should be encouraging better access control to data and provide people with tools for that. We'll see whether the questions come up, but at some point I think I want to tell you about my concerns for accountability in this online environment.
Well, now's a good time.
Yes.
Well, I think at this point, we do not have enough accountability for bad behavior in this network. And that the attention is created here because for a long time I was a big fan of anonymity, thinking, you shouldn't have to identify yourself to use these online resources. I still believe that that's largely true. However, this system has become empowered. It has empowered people to do a significant amount of harm in a short amount of time. And the normal way we deal with that is to hold parties accountable. Well, this is a hard thing to do in a global system where the data that flows doesn't know that it's crossed international boundaries. The packets have no clue that they've gone across the country boundary, and of course those boundaries change over time on top of everything else. So we carefully designed the system so that it didn't know which countries anything was going through, because it was being designed for the Department of Defense's command and control underlying communication system. It should work everywhere. So now I come to the conclusion that we have to have the ability to penetrate the veil of anonymity when the need is clear and under the right circumstances. I'll give you a crude cartoon model. The driver's license, the license plates on the cars are usually just random collections of letters and numbers. Except in my case, mine is Surf's Up. And everybody knows what that is.
That's a good one.
And Sigrid's is, we have Teslas, so hers is Amp Here, which is a misspelling of Ampere.
oh, I'm pretty sure I've seen that.
But many of them are just random. But some people have the authority to ask the question, who owns the car? That may not be who's driving the car, but at least that's a penetration of the otherwise anonymous license plate. I believe that we have to have the capability to penetrate that veil of anonymity under the right conditions. And I'm in favor of rule of law and human rights and all the other things that we care about. But unless we can hold parties accountable, then things will continue to fly out of control. And that's not acceptable in this society, or shouldn't be.
So you must love cryptocurrency.
I'm sorry?
So you must love cryptocurrency.
No, I hate cryptocurrency because I'm willing to make a distinction between things things like Bitcoin, which consume too much energy, or other untethered currencies, if it's bound to the U.S. dollar or some other fiat currency, I'm slightly more comfortable with it. But I don't see those cryptocurrencies as having any fundamental value at all. None. Zero.
There we go.
It's all what was it, 1600s and
The tulips.
Dutch
Yeah.
Dutch flowers. Yeah. So I don't see them as nuts, as far as I'm concerned, just nuts. And I know it's 120,000 or something like that dollars per Bitcoin right now. When people ask me about that, I tell them to run the other way. It looks like a Ponzi scheme.
It is.
It is.
I mean, that's the definition.
Yeah. So I am not a fan at all. Now, the argument that, well, it's an instantaneous transaction and nobody can undo it and all this other, that's crap. And the reason I consider it crap is there are lots of times when you want to undo a transaction. And so the current banking system has all kinds of mechanisms in it to protect those transactions, to allow them to be undone or disputed. And cryptocurrencies don't offer that. What they offer is an opportunity for anonymous flow of valuta for usually nefarious purposes. So I am not a fan, and I'm happy to go on record.
So a packet of data doesn't have to cross international lines to be needed to be held accountable.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes, I was not arguing that it needed to. What I'm saying is it's harder to deal with accountability when you're talking about a jurisdiction in one country where a perpetrator is operating and a victim in another country. Now we have international relations that have to be established in order to achieve the accountability that you're looking for. If it's even within a country, you run into the problem of different jurisdictions.
We have our own
Jurisdictions.
perpetrators that need to be held accountable.
So the problem here is not, the international aspect of the internet just makes it harder.
Yeah.
But the accountability is important no matter what the context is.
It's kind of, the more power you have, the more transparency you deserve to face. And the
I like
challenge.
that. That's a good equation.
Yeah.
That's a very good equation. Transparency is our.
How do you measure how much power?
Oh, I mean, that's, it's a principle,
your
it's not
network.
a calculation.
So
But
to follow up with
I mean,
that-
just one other thing is, and this goes back to the shrink wrap licenses. It's not enough to be transparent, you need to make sure you're intelligible. And that's probably the biggest problem with AI right now.
Yeah, the shrink wrap is usually transparent, right? You can see through it to the package.
No,
Over to you.
So, do you think if all the big players, Google, Meta, Apple, all the all the
Well,
online people
Amazon and
were
Microsoft.
willing to do away with Section 230, would they support that? I'm not asking
to
Google.
turn off
I'm
the
not
video.
asking Google specifically, but if everybody had
I don't
to,
think I can answer that.
okay, maybe not. I mean, it's a.
Well, the thing that you have to try to compute to answer that question is what is it that Section 230 has allowed to happen? You could argue, well, some of it's bad, and we might agree, but some of it has been good. The protection that allows companies to offer user-generated content has been beneficial. And so I don't think that's a trivial question to answer. And I think that many of us are still trying to struggle with how can we find
Well,
accountability.
there's organizations that are, bound by libel laws that,
Well,
have to vet things.
those
have
still
to,
apply. Those still apply. The question is.
Well, but if you're, gonna sue somebody in North Korea who doesn't have any assets, but if you're gonna.
Well, there's a cynical element to what you just said, because that's the American way. Sue anybody who's got
Well,
money.
no, I mean, but you're looking for
whether they're liable
accountability.
or not.
But you're looking for accountability,
form of
so, somebody who puts something out there that's nefarious,
Well,
but
then it's
doesn't
the-
have anything to lose in the transaction.
I'm
What
sorry, I
stops
don't
them?
think you and I are going to agree on this.
No, I'm not, position one way or the other. I just wonder if all the big players in this field said, okay, at this time we're all eliminate Section 230, would they do it, or would they still fight to maintain it? Because
I think that you will have asked companies to take on liability that is unreasonable if you did that.
Yes, thank you.
I just don't see that happening. And if you, the natural thing to do is the party that put the information up that's harmful is the party that should be held accountable. Now, you may argue that as a practical matter, that may not work.
okay,
And I hear you. But in principle, the party that did it is the one that ought to be held accountable.
I have a question. So you talk about lifting the veil of secrecy.
I'm sorry, say again.
You talk about lifting the veil of secrecy online.
Yes.
Generally-
I didn't say secrecy, I said.
Anonymity. Sorry.
Anonymity.
Big difference.
In general, I agree with that, but the more I think about it, and I've seen this argument discussed in many areas, but how do you protect like vulnerable populations from something like that, and how do you control who can penetrate that veil? And
So let me give you a couple of examples of how that works in our society. There are, of course, whistleblower lines and anonymous, reporting and so on. Thank you. But in many cases, even if you call the party to blow the whistle, the party may need to verify who you are in order to establish credibility and standing, even though that party may be obligated to protect the identity of the reporting party. You know this as a journalist. So, and we've seen journalists go to jail to protect their sources. So I think the partial answer to your question is that the anonymity might be preserved by the party to whom you are reporting, but the party to whom you're reporting, they need to know who you are. So now you have to rely on the protection of the party to whom you report. Absolute anonymity contributes to bad behavior. I'll give you a cartoon, concrete example. I suspect that those of you who drive have probably had things to say about the other drivers in the course of your journey. The chances are pretty good that you would never say those things to that party face to face without a windshield in between protecting you. Some people view the screen of the computer as the moral equivalent of the windshield in the car. And they think, well, nobody knows who I am, so I'm free to do whatever I want. I think at some point, we can't tolerate that. The ideal situation would be a society in which identifying yourself actually gives you more credibility. It may not mean that what you said is believable, but knowing the source helps you figure out. I mean, I can tell you that there are certain things that certain parties whose last names start with T say that the fact that we know where it came from helps us decide that it's probably not true. Wow, there's another one. Do you think we should go down into the basement?
I just want you to know it's 9 o'clock.
That's okay.
Okay, this is-
Carla, my chief of staff, is trying very hard, and I have early morning calls.
I know.
But I'm enjoying this if you are. So
I
let's
know,
keep going for a
I
while.
will be here
This
the
or the
rest of the
cappuccino?
night. I would stay here the whole night, but I wanna make sure you get back. You know, and I don't want Carla to be mad at me.
Let's keep going until we.
well,
from
from a meteorological standpoint, the weather storms were published till 9 p.m.
Okay?
So,
You could not have timed that better.
Yeah, really?
so we might, by waiting a few minutes, we might avoid
Yeah.
getting
There you
delayed.
go.
Good
Okay.
question.
Might.
We might want to keep going until the rain stops. Or
But when
something.
you
Well,
need to go, you need to go.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I don't want to make everybody stay too late either. So
Okay,
just,
yes, actually.
another 10 or 15 minutes would be
In
great.
Washington DC, usually it's considered appropriate to finish up around 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
To give it, I mean, that's a classic 9 to 9:30, the evening is over.
Okay, so 9:30,
So
you're okay.
9:30 is probably a good,
Okay.
a good target.
I'm just trying to
Okay.
do the right thing here. Because I would stay here forever. I don't have to go back to New York.
Okay, next question.
We have a question over here. Going back to security, with the advent of quantum computing, we're hearing that 128-bit encryption and a standard public-private key approach to are in jeopardy.
Wait, I'm not hearing this very well. You and I are mismatched because I have really bad hearing and your voice is very soft, so.
Maybe,
Can someone,
Jeff
Yeah.
can translate.
You know, with quantum computing,
Well,
Thank you.
The question is.
it has they boast that they will be able to break.
Okay.
How serious?
Yeah, okay. First of all, don't sweat the quantum computing state-of-the-art today because it's very primitive. We've invested a lot of time and money. We build quantum computers, but believe me, they're very modest in terms of their scale. It's almost a fluke that you can use a quantum computer to do factorization, because there aren't very many algorithms that a quantum computer can do, other than emulating quantum effects. But that's close to analog computing of the 1950s. A quantum computer can emulate quantum effects because it is a quantum effect. I think we're good. Does anybody else want anything?
Oh, wait.
Whose birthday is it?
Well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
Esther, I'm not singing. I'm not singing. We're just gonna say, happy love you, happy birthday, and you have to make a wish before you blow that out. You don't have to tell us what the wish is, but you have to make a wish. Maybe wish that we can do this again next year.
Sure. What a great prompt.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Oh my
birthday.
gosh.
Okay.
Thank you.
You should blow the candles
Oh,
on.
right,
Unless you like to
oh,
eat
the
cake.
wish, yes.
There we go. Good. Well done. You got that.
Oh my gosh. A Hallmark card. You know, there are some things that just can't be digitized.
That's right. That's right.
Can I ask another question?
Mhm.
It could actually apply to many people around the table.
Oh, wait, I didn't respond on the
Oh,
quantum
sorry.
thing. Let me finish
Oh,
with
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah, so here's the situation. The current state of quantum computing is still very limited in capability. It is nowhere close to breaking the RSA algorithms or the other things that rely on factorization. 25 years from now, that might be a very different story, and it's very reasonable to be worried that stuff that was encrypted today with today's crypto algorithms might be exposed 20 years from now. So Google and others have all, through NIST, have already adopted new crypto algorithms based on lattice mathematics, which does not suffer from the same limitations that we imagine quantum computers could inflict. The lattice mathematics, as far as we know, is not subject to quantum computation. So in the near term, adopting these new algorithms, which NIST has approved, will solve the problem for today's data and protecting it for the next 25 years or more. So that's the first point. A lot of people are imbuing quantum computing with capabilities that I do not believe are yet apparent. It's just, it sounds spooky because it is. Entanglement is weird, and we can do things with it that don't make a lot of sense. But I just had an hour's conversation with one of our best quantum guys at Google, asking about algorithms that could be run on a speculative quantum machine. And the answer is there aren't very many that we have confidence in. Ideally, it would be wonderful for doing large-scale optimizations, like planning routes, for example, or distributing multi-commodity flows and things like that. Lots of other possible optimizations. none of them have a quantum algorithm that has been designed to model the problem to help the quantum machine solve it, because the quantum machines solve things in a very particular way. They are not general purpose computers. So a lot of the hype associated with quantum machines is not unlike the hype associated with artificial intelligence, except AI has gotten a lot farther along in the recent past than quantum has. Quantum has gotten quite far along relative to where we were a decade ago, but it is still in its infancy. So I don't think that quantum is going to help us at all with regard to AI in the near term.
Do you agree, Frank?
I would say near term is spot on. I just think that, who knows, if we made, based on the progress we made in the last 10 years, even the last 5 years, going beyond the 5 to 10 year time frame is hard to predict.
I think the reason I'm so skeptical is that if you have ever sat down and tried to figure out how to write a quantum gate sequence to compute
that's-
something,
Have you done that?
it's
It gives me a
hard.
migraine, but yeah.
It's hard,
Yeah.
because you have to, let me see if I can give you an example.
You almost have to unlearn what you learned in traditional programming.
Here's the difference between quantum computing and ordinary math. When I was a kid, I was 10 years old, and I was in 5th grade, and I complained to my math teacher that there had to be more to arithmetic than, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fraction. And he said yes, and he handed me a 7th grade algebra book, and I went home and I solved all the problems in the algebra book, and I got all excited about it, especially the word problems. And the reason I got so excited about the word problems is there was this magic that happened. If you could take this paragraph describing a bunch of different relationships and map that into a symbolic description of those relationships, you could apply well-defined algebraic processes to find out what was X. It was easier than reading an Agatha Christie novel. So I got very excited about that. Quantum computing, the analogy here is that you need to have figured out how to map that text thing into a symbolic representation. Figuring out how to use quantum methods means figuring out how to characterize the problem in a way that allows the quantum method to be applied. Just like figuring out how to map the word problem into a symbolic representation to apply regular algebra. And I can tell you, it is hard. So don't imagine that we are going to have the same rapid evolution on the quantum side that we've had in the case of large language models. And even there, when you think a little bit about how we implement this stuff and do the training, it's basically matrix multiplication. We're doing tensors.
Yeah, very
And
large.
that's well known. That's a well understood process. We've designed special purpose hardware, our TPUs, and others have done that. But that's much more well defined than the quantum world.
That's true.
So that's where I stand.
At Frank's comment, I'm actually briefing DHS tomorrow on post-quantum cryptography, and I put Q day at 2032 right now. So sooner than a lot of people think. And that's based,
2032,
and that's based on some recent announcements. I mean, Google famously put out a paper 2 years ago, 20 million noisy qubits to crack RSA 2048. But a lot of attention to research has been put into error correction for qubits.
Yes,
A lot of new techniques to do
you see,
that.
the problem with that argument is, and we've invested heavily in error correction. Of course, the ideal thing is not to have any errors at all.
Impossible.
So that the calculation can continue to its conclusion. Because what happens is an entanglement dissipates over time. If it dissipates before you get an answer, you don't get an answer. So then you do error correction, which means you need a lot of qubits, because you might need 100 or even 1,000 qubits, physical qubits, to map into a logical qubit. So even if you solve that problem, you still have the problem of mapping the problem into the gate sequence that you need in order to solve it. That's the hard part.
And that's definitely the hard part, the information representation problem.
Yeah. And
But
so,
at least for Shor's algorithm, that's pretty well.
but Shor's is almost a fluke. Literally, the guys that work on this at Google told me that it is an ironic truth that Shor's algorithm actually works, because it isn't a quantum phenomenon. We're talking about factorization, that's discrete name.
Well, but fundamentally it's a QFT, which is a Fourier transform, which is a universal technique for lots of domains. So it could, I mean, maybe Shor's is a fluid for factorization, but QFT is a much more general.
I'll tell you what, I will believe you when you sit down and you show me a bunch of algorithms that solve interesting problems.
Yeah.
So,
right now
you're welcome to come and show me.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a challenge.
that's a challenge. Okay, next year we'll see the. Any other questions?
I had one, but I mean, you're gonna wrap up, I don't wanna ask
No,
you
go for
another
it.
question. I guess I was curious and I was gonna say, it's inspiring to me because around the table are lots of people who have lived through a certain kind of golden age of software development and software engineering. A lot of people think that is about to change with AI because of the capabilities that AI will bring to software writing, and we are seeing for the first time the labor data numbers dropping a little bit. So I guess what I wanted to know, others probably thoughts, is if a college student came to you today and said, I want to be a software engineer, would you say that is a good major and career path, or would you push them in a different direction to work in technology in the next era?
So I would still probably say yes, but it wouldn't be the software engineer of 20 years ago. It would be someone who knows how to make use of AI to accelerate the ability to produce software. We're on another example of an interesting transformation that's happened. You're all familiar with the AlphaGo, the successful playing with the Go game, and then came AlphaFold, which was folding proteins to figure out. Well, by the way, here's a little piece that you might not know, and I just learned it today. People get the impression that proteins are folded up into a fixed shape, and it's like a key in a lock. You know, where you have a receptor and this shape plugs into it, and that's it. That's not actually what happens. The folded protein is oscillating like crazy at 10 to the minus 13 seconds. I mean, the thing is changing in shape all the time, and eventually it fits, but then it rattles around and it pops back out again. If it didn't do that, if it just locked in there, then all of your receptors would be clogged and your body would fail. So it doesn't work that way. What happens is that it rattles around until it fits, and as soon as it fits, then you trigger something inside the cell that receptor is on the surface for. A bunch of stuff happens over there, and then the thing disconnects because its shape is rattling around. I didn't understand that, and for a long time I thought that knowing exactly what the shape was that's all you needed to know. Well, the answer is not quite, because that relationship is transient. And it's a damn good thing, otherwise your body wouldn't function properly. So anyway, there you go.
Now we know.
Now we could ask a recent electrical engineering computer science graduate.
That's you.
Oh, like that. Oh, yeah. So if you had to do it over again, would you?
I think yes. I think my personal take is that I think what you do as a computer science graduate, I think would foundationally change in the next 10 years. But I think you still need that skill set to build the next set.
Analyze the problem, break it into pieces, figure out how to solve it, put all the pieces back together. There's this great bunch of programmers boasting to each other. One guy says, when I was doing software, all I had was assembly language. It was really hard. You had tiny little steps, you had to figure them all out. The next guy says, you had assembly language? All we had was ones and zeros. And the third guy looks at both of them and he says, you had ones? So you're right. The skill set has not changed. You have to be able to analyze problems, break them down, figure
There
out.
will always be the ability
You'll
for
always need
humans to do that,
Yeah.
even relatively.
But you'll probably need fewer humans.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting is I think you'll find in companies there's a lot fewer people inside and many more on the edges. Overall, fewer people producing more value, which is why, again, I think there's going to be a surplus that needs to be
So
distributed.
you'll have to be, the competition will get much fiercer.
Yes.
We'll have to be
Yeah.
on top of the field.
Or the optimistic point, we'll be able to tackle more complex problems.
Yeah, but net, you'll need fewer of people
Or the same
tackling
number of people.
simple.
I like to be
Well,
optimistic.
well, you know,
I like
before
to
we,
be realistic.
before we come to a conclusion about this, take spreadsheets as an example. I can remember when I was in high school, I worked for a company called Rocketdyne. In fact, after I graduated from high school, I worked there for 6 months. They made the F1 engines and the H1 engines for the Apollo program, for the Saturn V rocket. I did spreadsheets on paper with a Marshall calculator. It took me a week to fill out the spreadsheet. And I would bring it to my boss, who was a little Chinese guy who'd been taught in Germany. And he would look at my spreadsheet, and he'd look at me, and he'd look at the spreadsheet, and he'd look at me, and he said, "Something is all screw up," and I would have to go back and recalculate for a week. So I get an Apple II Plus in 1979, and it's running a spreadsheet program, the name of which is just
Lotus 1, 2, 3.
no, it wasn't.
No, Apple Calc or
VisiCalc.
something.
No, yes.
Yes,
Yes,
VisiCalc.
VisiCalc. So it's running VisiCalc. So I put in a little spreadsheet, and I get an answer in 2 seconds, and a chill runs up and down my back. Because, oh my God, I can now explore solution space in real time, which I could not do before. And it's possible that the quantum computing will let us explore solution space for a certain class of problems anyway in near real time. That will be exciting. And so what's happened, of course, is that spreadsheets have become ubiquitous. Lots of people know how to use them. So you don't need to hire a company to do that. But you might need to hire a company to go and figure out what software you need in order to solve your problem. Which is why you should all look up something called Alpha Evolve, which is the latest thing coming out of Google DeepMind. It's an artificial intelligence system that figures out how to write a program to solve your problem.
Fitness functions.
So it's functionals in the mathematical sense versus functions. Functions is y equals x squared. Functionals produce functions. So it's one step indirect.
Metaprogramming.
That's very exciting. So and we exercise this with an interesting AI problem. When you multiply matrices together, there's sort of a minimum number of multiplies you have to do.
And
There's
you
all
reduce
kinds
it
of
by
numbers
one
that have to get multiplied and added together. And so 56 years ago, some guy calculated that the minimum number of computations, multiplies he had to do was 49. And so the Google team decided to tackle that to see if they could find a smaller number of multipliers required to do the math. So they used Alpha Evolve to go explore solution space to find a program which would go figure out whether you could do it faster. And they eventually evolved a program that figured out you could do it in 48 multiplies instead of 49.
You're right.
And
Because I've read the paper.
and it doesn't sound like much, but when you're doing billions of matrix multiplies a second, saving one multiply is actually a big deal.
I think they calculated the energy savings as a result.
Yeah,
And it was some
yeah.
Well, it's
astronomically
like
huge
2%
amount.
though.
Yeah.
Like 2% is still a good savings.
So, of 2% of a big number is a big number.
Hey, if I got 2% on the manufacturing line, I'd get a big raise.
Yeah.
So this idea of getting systems to help you, design systems to help you solve a problem is a really interesting indirect way of tackling these things. We'll need people who think like systems engineers and think like programmers. It's just that the thing that they're programming, which is what you point out, will be different.
It's funny you say that because I'm working with some researchers that are designing AI systems to write quantum algorithms. So
Yes.
they're
yes,
using AI to write the
yes,
quantum
yes,
algorithms.
absolutely. Although, yeah, but I have yet to see very good output.
I have
from
not
those
either,
systems,
but
yeah.
we're the infants.
One thing that may happen though is that even running a quantum emulation on a classic
Yes.
machine can sometimes turn out to be a better result than the classical approach.
Yeah.
We've got an example of this in weather prediction. We're using AI to do weather prediction for like 5-day out prediction. And it uses less computing power, dramatically less, than solving Navier-Stokes equations on a giant supercomputer. So instead of emulating the way the weather works in tiny little cells and higher resolution and endless computation, You take 40 years of weather information, you train the model with that information, then you take the last 48 hours of data at a fairly high resolution, and you make predictions, and incredibly, the predictions are better, or at least as good as the ones that come out from classical weather prediction models. They don't go as far. Weather prediction now is pretty good for 10 days. The ones that I know about, that doesn't mean I know about all of them, are probably better, good for 5 days. Not so clear how much further you go, but it requires far less computing power, which is really good.
You know, it's funny, I've just been reading so much about the tight job market and how AI is causing it, which is so funny because there's other things causing it. I mean, there's the fact that no one's leaving their jobs and all that, but it's really funny that they think that AI is taking away jobs so much that the housing market's tight. I mean, the job market's tight. It's weird.
It's an easy scapegoat.
Well,
I think.
Yeah, going back to the Dutch, I mean,
well,
they through there.
there may be some histories in here. Let me give you an example. In the 1400s, the printing press gets invented. But it takes about 200 years before a significant fraction of the population can read. So some of this is just, you have to wait until the new technology penetrates in there to create the new jobs. And you know, this happened during the Industrial Revolution. Jobs that used to be done by hand are being done with machines, but then somebody had to design the machines, maintain the machines,
Right.
build them. and-
Right.
And I would assume there was a lag time
Yes.
Yeah.
historically, so I'm not a pessimist or an optimist, I'm just an observer. But you could be early in the AI wave where we're feeling effects, but the new roles or jobs or functions have yet to be developed. That transition.
You know, it's
Well,
really,
it's-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, it's also up to us how we define jobs, how we value things, how we pay for people. And that's the big thing that
in
faces
education-
us.
And I think mass AI systems are still so new that we have to also see how users embrace them and what that
Yes.
creates.
Yes.
Nobody in 2007 was saying, my child will grow up to be an influencer.
Right.
And that is a
And now it's
job.
the number
one
That
job.
is a job. So,
No, it's not, except
we
for
had-
some lucky people, it's not a very well paid.
In education,
It's
we
not.
were constantly dealing with this. We were trying to prepare our high school students for jobs we had no idea that they would even exist in 10 years.
Yeah, I would like to jump in here on this point, because for many years, I think we thought that the idea was that you go to school for a period of time, and then you work for a period of time, and then you retire. And the theory was that you learned enough when you were during the school period to have a career. Well, this is no longer true. Just using the smartphone as an example, that's only 18 years ago. The world has changed dramatically in those 18 years. There are jobs that didn't exist before. We are going to have to learn how to learn new things, especially if we live long enough to have a 60-year career, which I'm certainly hoping for. Over that period of 60 years, a number of major things have happened. I have had to learn new things in order to stay relevant. It's pretending I'm still relevant.
You're totally relevant.
Well, so the point here is that there's a different kind of learning that's going to be important, and it shows up in one way at YouTube, where people go to YouTube and they say, "How do I do X?" And they find 17 videos that somebody put up just because they thought somebody might need to know that or might want to know that. I mean, that's the beauty of the openness of the system. That's a kind of learning that is really powerful, because you needed to know it now. I need to do that now. If you're motivated to go do something, then you're motivated to learn how to do it. That's a much more powerful thing than why the hell am I learning this? Well, someday you might need to know that. So this learning at the right time is very reinforcing. But it also means that we're going to have to learn how to learn in smaller pieces over long periods of time. So the universities are going to have to rethink what their product is.
Well, I wonder if it means, I mean, I don't know how it's measured, but for someone like my 17-year-old, I wonder if it means, to the point you're making, Jim, about you become acclimated to doing more self-learning opportunistically throughout your life, and therefore a certain degree of less controlled, sort of centralized academic learning in your school model. So my daughter may not be a great student in one way, but she might be functionally adaptable to learning into the society in a different way than I am.
I
Well,
think
we approached it as learning to learn.
Yes, we need people who want to learn and know how to learn and are willing to learn new things
And ask questions.
and ask questions. Amen to that. And keep making new
Gets me in a lot-
mistakes.
Gets me in a lot of trouble. Asking those
That's how you
questions
learn.
gets me in a lot of trouble.
So Vint, what's your feeling about Siri? I just.
Well, I don't have much to do with Siri since we don't use it.
You don't
We
use it at all,
We use
that's
Google.
right.
We use Google's Assistant because, of course, we're
Gemini.
using
Right.
Google equipment.
Right.
And I have mixed reactions to the Assistant. Recently, it hasn't been answering questions very well.
Really?
Can be
Yeah,
controlled,
I'm
can be
unhappy
controlled.
about
Yeah.
that.
Huh.
And I don't fully understand why. I'm just hoping that they don't record what happens after they've given the answer, because I say things that I probably wouldn't say to anyone to their face.
You need that glass window.
Yeah.
My favorite story is, this year I had a really bad allergy season for me, and if I'm home, I can ask Alexa, hey Alexa, what's the pollen report today? What's the pollen count today? She'll tell me, right? If I'm in the car and I have, Android Auto on, which otherwise is an awesome product, so kudos to the engineers behind that, it'll respond with a pollen report is the count of particle pollen particles in the air, and I'm like, I just need it's a funny example of how, but I think it also tells how reliant we are on voice, at least I am, voice assistant, and also I've been disappointed since ChatGPT came out. I've been very disappointed with Siri, Alexa, and the responses I get from Google.
Yes, you
Not
should.
just because I think the bar for my expectation of what AI is
It's going
possible
up.
to do is
Yeah.
so much higher, and
Yeah.
those have not caught up yet.
I feel like these things are being neglected by the companies that are offering them. I don't fully understand why.
They're getting ready to move on to the next thing, so they're not investing in the current.
They're not profitable.
The word rely on has popped up multiple times here. This is probably the most significant thing that we should all be worried about. We are becoming deeply reliant on very complex technology. It's potentially very fragile. I now tell my engineers when they start a design project, the first question they must answer is what could possibly go wrong? And more important, what could someone else do that would cause it to go wrong? If you don't have answers to those questions, you haven't even got to stage one of a good design. We're living in a brittle society right now, and the technology is part of that problem. I have another anecdote. I was at the Marconi Society meeting in San Diego. This is probably a decade ago. And we were talking about our dependence and utility use of communication systems. What else would the Marconi Society talk about? Somewhere in the middle of my talk, I said, we're actually more dependent on electricity than we are on communications. It was sort of a throwaway line. 2 hours later, all the power went out in San Diego for 2 days. And it started in Arizona with a failed maintenance test. Somebody skipped a step, and power failures all the way to Los Angeles and down to the Mexican border. So 2 days later, power comes back up, and somebody who'd been in the lecture sent me an email saying, you didn't have to do that.
Make your point. Hell of a way to make your point.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This was
you.
excellent.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go around, I don't know if I have enough books for everyone, so I'm gonna go around and give books to the highest donors, and then, so maybe a couple people won't get it. And then Esther has